He admitted to having 13 beers in a 4.5-hour period and then was impaired while he was driving, and he was pulled over for a traffic violation. His blood alcohol level was almost double the legal limit in Florida. Thankfully, our deputies spotted him before he could hurt anyone.
It was a busy 4th of July holiday weekend for Flagler County Sheriff's Office deputies.
In one standout case, a Palm Coast juvenile teen boy was caught in a sextortion scheme. Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley.
In this case, a juvenile sent private photos, and the individual turned out not to be who the juvenile thought it was, and tried to extort money from him, and then forwarded the photos to family members and his friends when he refused to pay. Parents, talk to your children and let them know that if they don't know who the other person is, don't send private photos to someone that you don't know. In fact, it's better not to even do it at all.
Meanwhile, on August 21st, the FCSO Community Engagement Section will be hosting Be Smart with Your Kids smartphone, presented by the FBI's Jacksonville Regional Office from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Flagler Auditorium. Then there was a traffic stop when an adult passenger allowed her unlicensed teen sister to drive across the state with 2 unsecured kids in the car.
The traffic stop on I-95 resulted in the arrest of a Fort Pierce individual for allowing her 16-year-old sister, who did not have a license, to drive from Fort Pierce to Jacksonville.
And there was a positive report, too.
Over the long holiday weekend, most of our community listened to our warnings to have a designated driver or boater and not drink and drive.
In all, Flagler County Sheriff's Office deputies made 62 arrests this past weekend, handled 944 calls for service, made 244 traffic stops, and conducted 9 boat stops and 2 inspections. For Flagler's Local Morning News, I'm Karen Johnson.
Good morning, Flagler County. I'm Rich Carroll. You're listening to Flagler's Morning News on Thursday, July 11th. Bunnell has its share of crime.
Just ask Police Chief David Brannon. He said that while there's retail theft or larceny that he talked about yesterday, the city has bigger crimes.
When I first got here, we had 2 drive-by homicide shootings in South Bunnell. And just a couple weeks ago, we had a drive-by shooting. Thankfully, nobody was hurt or injured, also in South Bunnell.
Along with investigating the crimes comes catching the bad guys.
Back in March, we did have a shooting in Bunnell where a young man was seriously wounded and fortunately survived those injuries. We rounded up the 3 men that were involved in that incident and arrested them.
Brannon said that he does not ever want to see another shooting in Bunnell if he can make it so. You can listen to Today with Pastor Jay here on WNZF Sunday mornings at 8 or anytime on the Flagler radio app. Tomorrow, what does Chief Brannon think of Bunnell having its own police department and not being under the Sheriff's Office umbrella? From the WNZF Newsroom, I'm Deb Albertson.
This local news is a service of Flagler County's Toyota dealer, Beaver Toyota US 1 St. Augustine, here to wow you.
We have a recruitment crisis, and it is, I can't overstate how much of a crisis it is.
Congressman Mike Waltz talks to WNZF about U.S. military recruitment issues.
Congressman Waltz says military recruiters can't keep pace with the number of servicemen and women retiring.
The Army missed its numbers over the last 2 years by 45,000. I mean, that's 4 divisions worth of soldiers that are just gone. I mean, you've got units without privates, or without nearly as many as they should have. The Navy is going to miss its numbers this year.
Waltz says the botched U.S. pullout of Afghanistan is partly to blame.
When they saw that debacle, when they saw that disgrace, I don't know any parent who said, I want my son or daughter signing up for that under this president.
Waltz says the current administration has mishandled the U.S. military from day one.
The very first thing Biden's new Secretary of Defense did wasn't, let's focus on lethality or introduce a new technology or announce new bases overseas or how we're going to bring troops home. It was standing down the entire force, all 2 million of them, to talk about the overwhelming scourge of white supremacy.
But he says the blame doesn't stop there.
We've had a political agenda by Biden's people pressed on this Pentagon, and we've had generals and admirals who have looked the other way.
For Flagler's Morning News, I'm Daryl Moody.
And now you're up to date on Flagler's Morning News. I'm Rich Carroll.